Okay, incredible. So jumping back into Kesser, Shem, B'siyata D'Shmaya. Actually, the first teaching on the page we did last week, we spent the whole shir on that piece, if you remember, about Yaakov, right? Yishlach Yaakov Malachim. We went through all the letters, the Yud, the Ayin, the Kuf, the Beis, all of creation wrapped up into this name, which happens to be my name, so it's pretty amazing. And then here we're taking a look now at Kesser Shem Tov Nun Hey. At least I have it as Nun Hey. Rabbi Yitzchak will tell us if it's actually Nun Hey there as well.
If you start,
Mibal Shem Tov Pirish Ha'inyan B'Chet Aleph. No. See, I told you it's the numberings are off in the different editions, so you'll have to scout around to find it. It should be in the vicinity. No, it should be in the area. Okay.
Good thing is it's Chelik Aleph and Chelik Beis, so I only have half to go through.
Okay, if you need, you'll use the paper. Says the Heilige Baal Shem Schusa Yagen Aleinu Pirish Ha'inyan B'Chet Aleph Shechata Adam. When a person does a sin for the first time, a particular avera, person transgresses, person slips, Nizdamen Lechet Acher Kadeshi Yashem Imenu. Hashem will put that person in the same nisayon, or at least a very similar nisayon, for the purpose of giving that person an opportunity to do tshuva. So, from that standpoint, avera gereres avera is actually a positive thing, right? That in avera that a person does will naturally draw an avera opportunity, so that this time a person should be able to abstain. And this in the Rambam is called tshuvas hamishkal, right? It's called equal tshuva. It's the ultimate. The ultimate, when a person is in that same position, and this time instead of doing the avera they did, they withhold. There's no greater tshuva than that, because you literally undid, right, what you did. You undid it. This time you did not do it, right? So that's the undoing of the avera, and that's the anhaga min hashamayim. And so a lot of times, when you learn that Mishnah, right, that avera, gereres avera, you learn it in a very naturalistic way. It's lokadai. I don't think to spend the whole time looking for it, right? So we need a chidushim, especially after yesterday's bomb. Unbelievable chutzpah. It was worth moving to London just for that, honestly. So when you read the Mishnah, you think avera, gereres avera. It's a natural thing. A person, it's like they say even today neurobiologically, you make pathways in the brain, There's certain pathways, right? Something like that's forged in the neuroplasticity of the way that a person's reward dopamine system works, that if a person has a positive, pleasurable experience one time, like, okay, the brain is more likely to want to go back to that place, because you have positive associations with it. Halavai that we should have positive associations with Judaism, and then it would be a lot easier. But we don't so much of the time, But if we really enjoyed davening and enjoyed Shabbos and enjoyed tefillin and enjoyed tzitzis properly as they're meant to be enjoyed, so that would be a different story. But according to the Baal Shem, it's actually much deeper than simply a naturalistic effect of a person's slip. That once a person slipped, okay, avera, now gereres avera. No, it's anhaga min hashamayim, that it has to be that way. That this experience is naturally going to bring another experience, but this time, not to make it harder for the person, to make it easier for the person, so to speak, so that this time a person should be tested with the very same thing, and they should be given an opportunity to withhold. Now, it's tricky, because since that pathway, let's say on the neurobiological level, has already been created, it's a bit more difficult this time than it was the first time, right? Because it's already ragil. And adrabah, a person already tasted the sweetness, right? The meduma, right? That illusory pleasure that the person had. And so it gets a little bit more difficult. But that's the tikkun. Like that's part of it. And the adrabah, that undoes, meaning the pain of abstaining the second time that might not have been there the first time, undoes the pleasure that was felt the first time. And then so it all evens out. It's like two puzzle pieces, you take them apart, and where one had a concavity, I think is the word concavity, the other had a convexity, right? Where one is stuck out, the other one is stuck in, and that way these two things are balanced. Okay, amazing. Kadeshi Yashem Imenu, and Ayidei Yeh Kaparas Chet Aleph. And through this will be a kapara, will be a atonement. Good morning, Gidon. Will be an atonement for the very first avera. So when the Yetzer Hara sees this, Mrs. Gaber love b'chet beis. So the Yetzer Hara obviously is not sitting by idly and letting the person fix up what they did, because then there's no point. So the Yetzer Hara makes it very difficult. And the second nisayon, even if a person's learned these Torahs, it's very difficult. And nisayon is a nisayon. You could learn all the Torahs in the world, right? Like the Gemara says, Ein Adam Oivra Avera Ela Imkein Nichnas by Ruach Shtus. Right? A person only does an avera if there's a spirit of folly, which is a lack of das that enters the person's mind. So all the das in the world is not necessarily going to help in that moment. Even though Mashchela Beis HaMedrash, right, the Barasi Yitzhar, Barasi Tar Tavlin, okay, it helps to the extent that it can help. But a nisayon is a nisayon. You know, it's difficult, and the Yitzhahara will overcome a person. But even so, Hashem Yizbarach Melitz Ba'adai Al Gimel Pishay Yisrael. Here quotes a pasuk that says that on 3 sins of the Jewish nation, I could handle. But the 4th, that's already a very big deal. All right? And the Navi goes through all the different sins of all the different nations. There's this concept of 3 is manageable. Once there's 4, so then it's solidified in a certain sense, and it's a big problem. So he says, until the 3rd Aveira, Al Gimel Pishay Yisrael V'chulu, that's okay. But when a person is sinning 3 times, so then what happens is that all layers of that person's personality, their naran is always Rosh Tevos, you guys remember? Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. Right? Every time you see in a sefer naran, it's an acronym for Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama. These are the 3 lower strata of a person's soul, right? Because then there are 2 upper layers, which are called Chaya and Yechida, but those are really very abstract and beyond. But within the functionality of a person, makes it very easy to remember. Nefesh is pure action, like mindless, unconscious movement. Ruach is speech, Dibor, right? The Ruach Memalala, speaking spirit, and Neshama is thought. Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. So says the Baal Shem, when a person is experiencing chait time after time after time, eventually after 3 times, it's almost as if like the concept of 3 with regard to their own personality, their nefesh, their ruach, their neshama is...
So it's not the 4th one that's the problem.
It's the 3, up to 3.
Including 3.
That's right.
Once you have 3, you have it like with the table, when you have the 3-legged table.
Exactly, it's a structure, right? It's a set, stable structure. That's right. Chut hamashulish leibim hera yunatek.
3 is finished.
Yes, 3. It gets very difficult. Yes. I'm sorry. Right, 3, right? Meaning Hashem could accommodate until the 3rd. Yes, until the 3rd one. Yes, that's what it means. Until the 3rd one, but by the 4th one. So then it's already, meaning after the 3rd, it will be very difficult, says the Baal Shem, to do tshuva, because he says over here that as and then a person's really in a downward spiral. And the paths of tshuva will be hidden, will be withheld from him or her. Until the person merits a great rachmanas from Shamayim. There are different ways to do this. There are different ways to break out of a cycle. Rabbi Nachman says in Sichos Ran, consistent Torah study. It's something similar to what we learned yesterday from Rav Kook, right? About Chosh and Mishpat. Like that's a real thing. A person wants to learn monetary law. And Adrab, it's a part of Shulchan Aruch that unless you're learning the Gemaras of it in Yeshiva, or unless you're studying for a Smicha in Dayanas, you're not really going to learn Chosh Mishpat so much. People are busy learning Archaim, and Eben Ezer, different parts that are relevant to different parts of life. Chosh Mishpat is not, but a person who's learning Chosh Mishpat, said Rav Kook, that's part of the pathways of tshuva. So Rabbi Nachman said if a person institutes Kviyas Itim, consistent Torah, that can be a big fixing for a person, even if they're stuck in a place of Hester, in a place of distance from Hashem. That's what Rabbi Nachman says. The Peli Yoyet says that a person who's stuck in this experience, it will be very difficult for them to break out of it unless they do a very big mitzvah. A very big mitzvah, something like out of the ordinary. They give an extra inordinate amount of tzedakah that they don't usually give. Hashem can arrange for a person to be in position to do a huge chesed, or to have a really strong davening. Like something very, very powerful can be enough to break the person out of their numbness, right? Out of their regila. Hergel, beautiful. Adshatichla regel manashuk. They're regilas. That's right. That's exactly what it is. Regilas. He says ad shirucha mishamayim, until Hashem has mercy on that person. V'zeh shekasav hanavi, and this is pshat in the words of the prophet, Nach b'sadracheinu v'nach. We seek our ways, we seek them out, v'nach, and we investigate them, v'nashuva elecha, and we return to Hashem. Ki achar shenasa kol kederech misha beinav, because after a person who's stuck in this experience of sin after sin after sin, eventually a person becomes desensitized, a person becomes ragil, and then ayidiki hashmin leva, like the pasuk says, the heart of this people, of the Jewish nation at that time, has become shamen, has become like heavy and covered over with all kinds of things. So therefore, if a person in that state wants to do tshuva, tzarech chipus v'chikor. It's going to take seeking out and investigating, really contemplating. How do I want to live? Do I want to live this way? Are there any shiurim that people are giving in the community that could help us, break out? But people don't think. If people really thought and contemplated, I'm getting older, life is passing by, and like, what am I doing? Am I growing? Am I evolving? We don't really have this thought. We're not really growth oriented properly, So therefore, tzarech chipus v'chikor sheyeda shechata. Then a person will know, hey, I'm not living the way that I should, and there are steps that can be taken. There are opportunities that are available. Az yashav adav yizbarach. Then a person will return to Hashem. So it has to be with this experience of nachbesa derachenu v'nach koira, right? With investigating, because otherwise, if a person just carries on without this, so then it could be that they'll be stuck, right? And they'll never find the way to break out because they don't think that they're in, right? They don't think that they're stuck. They don't think that there's anything to wake up out of, right? Until a person really takes the time through his spononus, his spodidus, so they get shaken up a little bit in life, something happens, and they start to think, and then things change. And that's why, another beautiful thing, just from the positive standpoint, is that you never ever know. You can never ever say anything definitive about a person, because you have to remember that whatever a person's position is, whatever a person's opinion is, this is as they are now. You don't know where life will take a person. You can never give up on a person. You never know. You never ever know. Because 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, a person, I don't connect this yet. I always add the word yet. Because you never know. You don't connect now. You don't connect at this moment. You connect in 5 years, in 10 years. A person hits a little bump in the road. Life gets a little bit more serious. A person gets older. And then people come around. So you never know. And that's why also the seed planting. Sometimes you're not here to give a person something in the present. People are not always capable of onboarding what you're telling them in the present. But sometimes, just by planting a little seed, you never know. You never know when it will flourish. And it's just, you brought up that word, regilus, right? So that's a reference to what we learned in a previous year about hergel, right? Acha tichla regel menashuk. That it's coming Hanukkah now, Be'ez Hashem, another few weeks, getting there, right? And the Hanukkah candles are lit in such a way that it's mishetishka hachama, right? From when the sun sets, ad shetichla regel menashuk, until we assume that the majority of the people have left the marketplace, right? Because that's where Pirsumei Nisa is. Ad shetichla regel, where all the feet have gone out of the shuk, right? So the word regel could mean feet, but the word regel could also mean, like we're learning, regilos, which means habits, right? Regilut, things that a person is accustomed to, used to. So there's a very beautiful Gemara in Shabbos that says, Haragil bener havin lan banim tamid chachamim. That a person who's careful about Neros Shabbos, Neros Chanukah, a person who makes sure to take care of those things properly, will have children who are tamid chachamim, or children who are proper and going in the proper way. So you can say, like, there's two kinds of regilos, right? There's a regilos of ra, right? There's an accustoming oneself to sin, right? Time after time after time. And then there's ragil bener, which we can say is a person who accustoms themselves to be a ner Elokim nishmas adam, right? To identify with their neshama. Why is the neshama identify with the ner? The Baal HaTanya says because a candle, a flame, is on the wick, and if you ever notice, the flame is constantly in tension with the wick, right? It's always trying to shake its way off to the side, up. It's flickering, it's dancing, it's yearning, and says the Baal HaTanya, that's what a neshama is. The body is the wick, the body is the anchor, the body is the container. The neshama is constantly, it's trying to really to escape, but knowing that it's not intended to escape. What it is intended to do in jumping up is to draw the body up with it. You know, they say a story about a chassid who, a misnagid was once walking by, a person who was opposed to the Hasidic path. And he walked past the shtibel, and they were singing particularly Lebedek Geschmack, Niggin, and he just looked through the window, and there was one chassid who was just jumping, not even dancing, he was jumping up and down. And so he went in, and he tapped him on the shoulder, and he said, I don't understand you. You're jumping, and it's very beautiful, but every time you jump, you come right back to the ground. Well, what's the point? Right? And it was like a metaphor for like this whole thing of Hasidus. Like you have like an ecstatic spiritual experience, and then you come down. Parenthetically, another story they say, and I'll come back to this story, in true Breslov Rabbi Nachman styles, like story within a story. So they say a story about the Baal Shem Tov's horses, a famous thing. Where the Baal Shem Tov was once on a journey, and Kiyadua, the Baal Shem traveled in different ways. Some people travel with horses, some people travel some people travel with holy names. And the Baal Shem Tov's horses were flying. They were flying in the air, in the sky with the wagon and everything just soaring through the clouds. And one horse said to the other horse, he said, I don't think we're horses anymore. He said, what do you mean? He said, look at us flying in the sky through the clouds. We're angels. We've been transformed. We're not horses anymore. He said, I hear. You might be right. I don't feel like a horse. Horses don't fly. Look at us. We're flying through the sky, through the heavens. And when the Baal Shem Tov got where they needed to go, and they brought the horses into the stable, and they put in front of them the whole trough, the whole thing full of oats, and and their heads are, just in the trough, like covered in oats and chomping and munching. And one of them turns to the other and he says, I think we're horses still. It's such a meduyak story, So this is what he told the Hasidim. Why you think you're angels? You're a horse. You come back, you fall down to the ground. And you know what the Chassid told him? He said, to you it looks like when I jump and I land, I'm landing on the ground, the same ground that I left. But you don't realize that every time a Chassid jumps, the ground comes up with him. And I fall down to the ground, but the ground is higher than it was. So again, it's a metaphorical story, right? What it means is that the wick of the neshama, it jumps and it looks like it can't escape, and it looks like it's bound to the wick. But we don't chap. Every time we yearn, even if it doesn't look like we achieve something, we lift the physicality up. We become a little bit holier, a little bit more refined, right? We're not here to escape the body. We're here to elevate the body. So I want to say haragil bener, right? A person who has allowed the ner Chanukah to tichle regel min hashuk, to get rid of the regilus, the custom that comes from the shuk, right? The external influence. And instead we turn our natural way of looking at the world to be one of ner. So then then we can be role models for our children. Then we can be people who are striving, growing, never settled, never stuck. People who are awake to the reality that life is short, is brief, Life is brief. It's a very brief little mission we're here for. And we model for our children what it means to be a person who's constantly striving, humble, always looking to learn, to yearn, to learn, and to become higher. Haragil bener, like that should be our new regilas. Once you swap out the regel menashuk with the nearest Chanukah Be'ez Hashem. In the right place, sure. In the right place, right? And adarabah, the regilas that we want is an e-regilas, meaning that your natural state is a state of never being in a state of regilas, meaning you're in a constant state of inconsistent stability from the standpoint of religious growth, right? Constantly trying to strive. There's no constant. The only constant by you is no constant. Like Rabbi Shlomo says, that he only has one principle, that there's no principles. Like there's just, you can't have principles. Principles are going to kill people. Rabbi Shlomo said, if a person has a principle that, a food store is open until 5 o'clock on the dot, and he says a beggar comes by at 5:01 and he's absolutely starving, you say, no, store closes at 5. Like, you have to be a little bit not so rigid in life. Otherwise, things can't function properly. Okay, let's push forth a little bit. We take a look at the next teaching, Kesser Shem Tov Nun Vav. Me'abal Shem, Zechrona Levracha. This is so important. This is so powerful. Rafi, maybe join us just for this. We have 5 minutes. This is so important, this teaching. Noida, he says it's known, ki ois aleph hu chachma. The letter aleph is always hinting to the sphera of chachma, which in a certain sense, if you leave out Kesser is the crown, and Kesser is associated with the will of Hashem, with the yearning, with the desire, the motivation of God to create, which is why it's the first sphera, because it's the first step in the creative process. If you leave Kesser out, then the whole system begins with chachma, and that's why the pasuk says, Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. There's a concept where chachma is reishis, and in that sense, because we can't fathom the will of Hashem, so not going to talk about Kesser, talk about chachma. Chachma encompasses the entire master plan for the creation of the world from beginning to end, in time and space, everything. Chachma. So the letter Aleph, and the Aleph Beis, which is also a series of layers, right, from Aleph down to Beis to Gimel to Dal, which we've said in the past in the Shiurim, all the way down till Taf, is Aleph, is Chachma, very first. K'maisha Kasov, and that's why the pasuk says, Va'alefcha Chachma, and I shall teach you Chachma, right, like an ulpan, right, comes from the word Aleph. Aluf is a chief we just had in this week's parsha, last week's parsha, right? Aluf is means to teach, to guide, to lead. And it's the letter Aleph. Va'alefcha Chachma. With this we could understand Bereshis. The word Bereshis has a targum. And the targum says on the word Bereshis, Bechuchmisa, with intellect, with wisdom. Bereshis, because Reshis is Chachma. Right? So the targum translates Bereshis as not like in the beginning or with the beginning, but with wisdom. With this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created heaven and earth with Chachma, with the sphera of Chachma. And says the Baal Shem, well, if the letter Chachma, if the sphera, the energy of Chachma is connected to the letter Aleph, so ki kol chaf beis oisias hem levushim ze lazeh. And this is the fundamentally different way that the Baal Shem and the Mekubalim looked at creation to those who were just on the level of Pshat. Because on the level of Pshat, you have Aleph, and then you have Beis, and then you have Gimel, and you have Dalet, and you have Hey, and so on and so forth, all the way down till Taf, and that each layer is one below the other. And from that standpoint, we develop a conception of the Creator as being all the way up there, and we're connected from the standpoint of we eventually are associated with Him, right? Because He's our Creator, and we're the creation, and there's stage and stage and stage and stage and stages until you get to Taf. And sure, we're a part of it, but Aleph and Taf. That's the way that we generally conceive of the world.
What's the outer layer?
Tough? But not even outer. No, over here there's not outer layers. Over here it's just a chain, and it's the lowest layer. That's the difference, as we're going to say in a minute. Says the Baal Shem, but that's not how it works. Because ki kol chaf beis oisios, all the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis are actually hem levushin zelazeh. They are enclosed within one another. Ki Aleph, because the letter Aleph doesn't just stay up there and then from it comes Beis, and from that comes Gimel, and from that comes Daled. Aleph descends into and manifests Beis, but the Aleph is at the core. Because Beis is just two Alephs, right? The letter Beis is not something different than Aleph. Beis will include Aleph, because it just numerologically, right, one is included always in two. You cannot have two without one. You cannot have three without two. So you see, all the letters are nitlabesh, are enclosed within the others. Beis Alphin, Gimel, is Gimel Alphin, right? The number 3 is just 3 Alephs. The Reishis Habriya Hayal Yidei Ois Aleph, into the beginning of creation, which is literally Hashem's presence, right, in the most unadulterated, unconstricted, ungarbed way. Shu chachma, who bara hakol al yidei chachma, and Hashem created everything with chachma, which is the letter aleph. Kulam bechachma asisa. You created everything with chachma. Hare, so you know what that means? Ruchniusa yizbarach besoich ois aleph. That means Hashem's spirit is in that first letter aleph, where there's nothing else but the Creator and His will and His thought and His machshava, like mufshat, without any levushim, it's just there. And that very entity, right, of the Ein Sof, descends into the letter Beis. V'nis atifloi, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu put on this garment, ubara or min ois aleph, hu ar atzilus, He created a light, and that's called the world of atzilus. V'achar kach nes atif im aleph b'soich ois beis, and then that layer is enclosed within the letter Beis, ubara olam abriya, and that becomes the world of bria. So if the best physiological, like the best physical symbol to use to help us think about this is the old telescopes. Right? Because otherwise very, very difficult, right? A telescope is exactly this. When it's unfurled, and it's very, very deep, that's called the Hanhaga in the Rashash, and they're going to this, it's called Oirech, right? Unfolded, which is generally how we perceive the world from our perspective, is, again, God is all the way up there, and there's the extension of the telescope so that the first segment of the telescope remains completely lamala, right? It remains above, and then from it, right? You understand? You pull it down. The second segment unfolds, but it's not connected to the first in any real way. They don't overlap, right? Where the first ends, the second one begins, and then where the second one ends, the third begins, and so on and so forth, depending on how many different segments there are to the telescope. But the Rashash and the Mekubalim explain that at the very same time that you and I are experiencing the world from the standpoint of Oirech, and that means we have free will, we really exist, all of this is real, right? From like the bottom of the telescope, it's mind-blowing. Bottom of the telescope, at the very same time, there is something called Ovi, or Oivi, which is width, right? There's length and there's thickness. And that means that at the same time, the telescope has never been unfolded. And here, now, is the very first segment of the telescope, which is pure ruchnius, pure godliness, that is the neshama of our experience. It isn't somewhere up, like usually we speak about, even in Kabbalah, right? You speak about the Olam HaTzilus and the Olam HaBriya and the Olam, which is certainly better than just saying, oh, God is somewhere, He created this world. At least there's like a link, that's already a level. This is much deeper. This means that, no, here is Olam HaTzilus. Here is Olam HaBriya. Here is Olam HaYetzirah. Here is Olam HaAsiyah, because the telescope is folded up. And all of the layers exist one within the other. And that's an incredible shift in terms of understanding the nature of reality, where, like, if you just peel off, right, the layers of our human experience, you're going to encounter the primordial light of the Ein Sof. Aleph is within Beis. Beis is within Gimel, and so on and so forth. The whole Aleph Beis is folded up, so that we living in this physical reality are in the outermost layer. But Olam Haba is not somewhere else. It's just it's folded up into our experience and our ways of accessing deeper and deeper and deeper layers until a person can come to encounter Hashem's presence here in this world.
Maybe this is. I was once.
You can carry on.
Something similar in the expression and looking from it from a perspective, because you have a narrow bridge, but which point is narrow? Is it the gap that's narrow, or is it the bridge to get to the other side that's narrow? And I think with this particular limit, it's like, well, it's both. On the one hand, you have you spoke about the Ovi and the Oirach.
Right.
You have it is very narrow. Really, it's all happens simultaneously. But yes, there is the concept of the experience that you need to get to the other side.
Both are true. Yeah, there's and then we'll finish with this. There's a similar concept in the Kabbalah of the Ari, which isn't exactly the same thing, where there are two hanhagas of the spheros. One is called Yosher, right, where the spheros are laid out like we usually think of it in the Tselem Elokim, right? So Kesser, Chachma, Bina, like we're familiar with the chart of the spheres. And then there's another anhaga called igulim. Igulim, circles. The reason why this is slightly different and why it's a bit confusing is because in the circles, it's not like the telescopic model, right, where the innermost is the aleph, right, and then it sort of goes into the next, and then the next. Over here, it's the opposite. The outermost circle is Kesser, right, and then in that, in concentric circles, is the Chachma, and then in that is Bina, and so on and so forth, until the middle center point is Shabbos, is Malchus, right? So it's slightly different, and so that's why I wanted to use the Rashash's conception, which using a telescope is like a really good way to think about it, right? Orech and Ovi, and both are true. Both are true. Okay, to contact the deeper layers of creation, and it begins with these teachings. Like, if you don't know this, it's going to be impossible. It's just going to be impossible. So we're Baruch Hashem, we're expanding our minds, helping us conceive of reality in deeper ways, and Hashem should help us to access Be'ezus Hashem, to access.
שכל כך אוהב אותי, האב שלי. מלך חי וקיים, על כל נשימה שאני נושם.